Hey, what's up guys? So Foundry just updated their Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game system to version 1.6 a couple of days ago, and I thought we could go over it real quick so you could see what's in it and how it all works. The big feature here is an automated character advancement system. Now, two quick warnings we should get to at the start of this video is you need to be running version 9 or later of Foundry for this to work. So if you're running version 8 or earlier, do not update. Second, unless you're running only SRD classes and subclasses, or starting a brand new campaign in a brand new Foundry world, this update is going to require you to spend quite a lot of time updating things manually to make it all work for your existing campaign. My advice, if you're thinking about updating to 1.6, watch the rest of this video to get fully informed on what's involved in that process so you can make an informed decision about whether or not you want to spend hours updating existing character tokens to work with the new features. Now, there's really only one big new feature, and that's the character advancement system, which will basically help automate your level up process. Whenever you gain a level, it will offer you the ability to roll hit points or take the average, and it will automatically add new class abilities to your character sheet for you. In theory, you could also have it add equipment and spells and a bunch of other stuff too. It's pretty cool. The other feature they've added is backgrounds, which is a pretty bare bones feature for the moment. It basically lets you drop in a character background and have it advance in the same way a class might, but for the moment it doesn't really do anything other than show up in your sheet, and only the Acolyte background is included for the moment. It doesn't automate anything like skill proficiencies or languages, although it does let you add starting equipment to the advancement tab, which is pretty cool. Anyway, that's about all I have to say about backgrounds for now. It seems like they mostly are just laying the foundation with that for now, but they probably plan to fill it out a bit more later. Finally, they added a tables compendium, which I will bring up for you right here, which includes SRD content about madness and the bonds, flaws, ideals, and personality traits of the Acolyte background. The background tables are nice, as you can see, but there's no automation included with them. They're just roll tables. Once you roll your trait, there's no way to automatically put it in your character sheet. Now, you can manually enter it in the biography tab, which is something, but it'd be cool if in the future they'd let you place this stuff just straight from the roll table directly into the character sheet, or have you roll directly in the character sheet just to give it that full level of automation. As it is, you can't really, if we roll here, we can't copy and paste from the chat room for whatever reason. So the DM can go in here and copy and paste from there, but it's not a perfect solution. So a little bit more automation there would be quite welcome. Now, that's basically it for the updates. So in the rest of the video, I plan on going in depth on the ins and outs of the advancement system, showing you how to use SRD content for a brand new character, how to custom make non-SRD content, whether you're homebrewing or just using the other official classes and subclasses like, say, the Artificer or the Death Domain subclass. Then I'm going to show you the monumental pain in the ass that updating existing characters is going to be for you, so you can decide whether or not you should update right now or wait for another time. Personally, I think if you're in the middle of a campaign, the time you're going to lose manually updating all of your tokens is not ever going to be saved by the little bit of automation granted with this update, and so you should probably wait for a bigger update with more features that you do want. However, if you're at the start of a new game and haven't yet made new characters, this is sort of a no-brainer update to grab, as it will definitely save you time in the long term. Okay, so let's make a brand new character using SRD content. Simply create the new actor. Let's go into the actor tab, create actor, player character. We'll just call it test. It's fine. And you can see we start off with 0 hit points. It's a blank character sheet. Open up your compendium, go under classes, and let's use Cleric. Let's say it starts you off with max HP at level 1. It doesn't give you any option to roll it or anything like that. So if you have to make any adjustments, you'll have to do it manually. And then it gives you your standard features right off the bat. You can see the features down here. One thing to note about the hit points is because we have con 10, it just gives us the standard 8. However, if we had 14, it would have put it up at 10. The problem is now we're doing it after the fact, and now it doesn't update automatically. So we have to go back and update that to 10, for instance. Now, if instead, let's just drop this back down to 0. Let's delete out the Cleric abilities real quick, and we'll redrag this in. And you can see the con is 14 now. Hit complete, and boom, starts us off at 10. Pretty cool automation there. Now, because the Cleric gets their subclass at level 1, let's go ahead and drag that in now. That's the life domain. Automatically gives you your bonus proficiency in heavy armor, I believe, and Disciple of Life. Now, the bonus proficiency is cool because they've updated a lot of the features, class features and whatnot, and this is actually automated. So you can see right there, even though it was blank before, now we have heavy armor. And they did that by adding the effect right there, which is very cool. So that's basically done. Now, if we, instead of starting off at level 1, let's say you're running a campaign, you want all your players to start off at level 3, we could quickly level up just by dropping down to level 3. From there, you can either roll your hit points, and you can see it populates in the chat room, or you can take the average and it goes to 5, or you can also re-roll the die as many times as you want, and you can just manually type in 8 or whatever you want right there, and it'll follow that. See, we're getting our channel divinity and turn undead, and this is the scaling, which we'll get into a little bit later, but basically this adds a level of automation that's pretty cool also. We'll get into that in a minute. Next, it is adding our features from the subclass. This is the Preserve Life Channel Divinity. And now we're going into level 3. We'll just take average for that and complete it. And now we are done. So you can see that if you're using the SRD content, it's very straightforward, especially if you're making a brand new character. But now let's say you want to make a new character that's not using SRD content. Maybe you're using a different subclass for Cleric, or maybe you're not even using any of the standard classes and you want to use Artificer, or you want to use, a homebrew class or something. For that, let's go into the actors. We'll create a new actor. We'll just call this Test 2, for instance. And then go into your items directory and create item, select class, and we'll call this, I don't know, the warrior class, right? Not being too fancy here, it's just for the demonstration. Under description, that's just flavor text, don't worry too much about that. Under details, the identifier is extremely important. It's probably smart to just name it the same thing as the class name. That's going to be used for all role formulas, and it's also going to be used to link your subclass to it. The hit die you select here, this is going to be the permanent hit die that you use across this class for all of your levels. We'll just say D10, for instance. And then spell progression, if it's a spellcaster, they've got Artificer, Pact Magic, all the types of casters. Let's say he's a half caster, for instance. And then spellcasting ability, this is very cool. You used to have to manually handle this in the character sheet. This is much easier, and we'll just say wisdom. Under proficiencies, this is all good for reference material, but there's no automation associated with this. So if we select con and intelligence, for instance, it's not going to automatically populate that in our character sheet. Same thing for class skills and chosen class skills and all that. From there, we go to advancement, and this is the major tab. It's pretty blank at first. You just hit the plus sign there. We'll start off with the easiest thing, which is just the hit points, because as soon as you select it, create, you're basically done. You can rename it, you can give it a new icon, but it's basically done, right? There's no way to adjust this per level, but instead you go into details and you can swap it out there. From there, hit the plus sign again. Let's do grant items next, because it's not too complicated, but it's a little more complicated than the hit points. This basically is going to be all of your features, or if you want to give equipment or even spells per level, this is a good way to do it. This would be a great idea. I wish they included this by default. If you are a cleric, a druid, or a paladin, basically a class that gets access to all of their spells of a current level at whatever level, right? So it would be, you could, in theory, at level 1, give your cleric all of the level 1 spells, and then at level 3, give them all of the level 2 spells, and at level 5, all the level 3 spells, and so on and so forth. So with this, create advancement, and then it's going to ask you what level we're doing this for. We'll start off with level 1, and then you just drag items into here. I would recommend you drag things from your various compendiums, but you can also drag them from your items tab. So let's say we want our guy to start off with a crystal for some reason, Or if we wanted to open up our class features, if for some reason we wanted to have, I don't know, blind sense, we could just drop that in there and boom, we're done. And then if we want to add something for level 2, go back into grant items and then select level 2. You can also make these things optional if you want to give your players the option to opt out any of the items. And for this, we could give them something completely different. Let's, I don't know, a large crystal now, right? Obviously, this isn't meant for items primarily. You're mostly going to be using this for class features and such, but you can pretty much do whatever you want there. Now let's go into scale value. This is kind of complicated, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty powerful if you can figure out how to use it inventively. So scale type, we can do anything, numeric, dice, or distance. Let's start off with distance because this is pretty cool. So let's just call this move. You can see that automatically changes our formula to @scale.warrior.move, right? So for this, let's say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, right? So you've got that. And now you can see it's populated all right here. You can do another thing. Let's say we want to do, instead of movement, let's say we want to do dice, right? Think of the monk's unarmed strike and how it levels up from a D4 at level 1 to a D6 at, I think, level 5 or 6, something like that. And then it eventually gets up to, I think, all the way up to D10 eventually, right? So we could do something like that. Start with D4, and then at level 5, go up to D6, and then at level, I don't know, 10, it goes up to a D8, and so on, right? And we'll call this strike, right? And now you can see at level 1, we get a D4, at level 5, a D6, at level 10, a D8, right? Pretty cool. So now we can create a subclass. Go back into the items tabs, select subclass, and we'll call, let's see here, swordsman. Simple enough. Again, it looks pretty much the same. It doesn't have the hit die or anything. Under class identifier, so identifier is going to be the subclass, but class identifier, you're actually going to use warrior or whatever the class is. Spellcasting, under spell progression, think of fighter that has the Eldritch Knight, right? By default, the fighter class doesn't have any spellcasting, but if you pick up Eldritch Knight, you can actually cast spells. That's the reason why you'd use this. Otherwise, just leave it at none, and that's good enough. And then here, you hit the plus sign. It doesn't give you the hit points because, again, that comes from the main class. And then you can do grant items, say poisoned arrows or something. Easy enough. Hit it again. You can do scaling if you want. You know, it basically works exactly the same way. So from here, let's create 2 items real quick. Let's call one, it's just going to be a feature. We're going to call it move. And then all we, you know, you can do whatever you want here, but all we're really looking for is the effects add coming in here. And we're going to hit the plus sign, go to, I think it's attributes, movement, and then walk. And then under effect, you want it to be additive. And under effect, we're going to take a look at our scale value here, right? And so we want to use the identifier here. So @scale.warrior.move. Submit, and that is that. So now we go back into the warrior and we hit grant items, drag in move for level 1, and boom, done, right? Next, we're going to add a second item, and we'll call this strike. And we'll make this a weapon. And we're going to do a similar thing. We're not going to use the effects tab, but instead we're going to we'll call it a simple melee weapon, activation cost, 1 action. This gets this stuff to populate. You should know how to do this already. If not, you can check out my other videos. I go through pretty much all of the settings in Foundry in a series of other videos that I've done, so check those out. We're going to open up the damage formula, and then if you were a monk, originally you'd have to do 1d4, right? And then if you leveled up to a d6, you'd have to remember to come back into the strike and click back into here and then manually update it to 1d6. There were other formulas you could use, but for the most part, it wasn't as automated as it now is. So now all you have to do is just type 1 at, and then we're going to come back to our scale value here for the d4 here, right? And you can see all we do is at scale.warrior.strike, enter, and we are done. And now we're going to open up warrior again. We're going to add another item, grant items, and drop in strike at level 1. Okay, so now that that's all done, let's add the warrior. You can see we start off with 10 hit points. Got the crystal and the blind sense, whatever that means. Get the move, get the strike, the scale value of 5 feet, the D4. Now, before we complete it, note we start off with 30 feet, right? Hit complete. All this stuff gets added in. Look, our speed is already up to 35 feet. We'll drop in the swordsman. That gets us our poisoned arrows, and you can see we got all that stuff here. We use the strike. And boom, it starts off at a D4. Now we're going to go back in and we're going to level our character up to level 5. We'll just take the average hit points, get the large crystal, great. We got boosted to 10 feet. Level 3, we're going to take the average again, 15 feet, 20 feet, 25 feet, and the D6. And now we hit complete. And you can see we're up to 55 feet of movement now. This is a little overpowered, but that's okay. Hit strike, roll it again, and hopefully you should see a D6 being rolled. Look at that, a D6. Pretty cool, right? Pretty powerful. And again, if you are doing this for a brand new character, this is a little bit of legwork to create something from scratch. But if you're doing it at the start of the campaign, you do it once and it will basically last you forever, for as long as you need that class. And you can even, import these into new campaigns. So you really only have to do the work once. Whereas in the old way, you'd have to do all this manual work every single campaign. And so this is very cool, and for every single character. So this is very useful. Okay, but now let's talk about the negatives. Mainly, if you're looking to use this update in an already established campaign with, say, mid to high level characters, then this is going to kind of be a big pain in the butt for you. The problem is the automation that existed before when you level up no longer does. So if you update, you lose out on the old system, forcing you to fix it in one of two ways. First, and probably cleanest, but definitely the most work, you can delete your character's classes and completely rebuild it from scratch in the new system. The problem is that, and here, we'll use one of my player characters, for instance. If you're curious as to why I have so many folders, it's because I run a multi-group, large-scale campaign called the Chords of Chaos. I presently have about 20 players over 3 or 4 different groups, and it's all within one universe, and so it's a little bit complicated. But anyway, I don't want to mess anything up, so let's just duplicate Nura here. She's my monk character, played by another player. Now, you can see we've got all of these features. I've done some heavy homebrew on this character, even though she's a level 6 monk. I've given her action surge. We've gone kind of off the rails in the campaign a little bit. Well, now, if I want to just delete the monk class, it doesn't delete anything else, right? Which is good, but it's a little bit complicated now, because if I go back in and we go into classes and drop in monk, and hit next, complete. You can already see it's giving us all kinds of errors. That's mostly because there's other stuff that's no longer associated with this new update and stuff. And then she was level 6, so let's go into that. And this gets complicated too, because now it's gonna watch what happens to her hit points. It started off wherever it was. It doesn't remember that she should have been like 0 hit points. So if we just take the average, it's just gonna keep boosting and boosting and boosting it. So you got to remember this. And yeah, now you look at this and you can see you've got 2 keys, 2 flurry of blows, patient defense. You get 2 of everything now, right? And maybe you can figure out what's what, and it might not be that big of a deal. But if you, again, have homebrewed a lot like I have, then you're going to find that a lot of this stuff is no longer compatible, but it might be compatible with the new system, which means you have to like port over your old stuff into the new stuff and make it all work for you, which could be kind of complicated, or at the very least, just a lot of busy work. And thankfully, she's way of the open hand, so we can just drop this in. But now we're going to see that we duplicate some more stuff here. So now we have 2 wholeness of body. It's complicated, to say the least. And this is with a character using SRD content. If I weren't using this, and look, she's up to 98 hit points now, right? And 55 feet of movement, which just isn't, for a dwarf, like, it shouldn't be the case, right? And now I've got this object. I think this is a problem with the module and not necessarily the Foundry update. But still, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. And now I have to like go through all of this stuff manually to fix it all. So this is one way to go about it, and it's probably the cleanest overall. And if you're not using any homebrew rules, and if you haven't modified anything, and you're purely just using vanilla content, it might not be that big of a deal for you. But if you are, I mean, goodness, it's gonna be a lot of work, right? So that's one option. And let's just get this out of my sight because I'm getting nauseous just looking at it. The second option is you could modify the old class, which basically requires you to go through an existing class and rebuild it level by level, and then do the same for the subclass. So with Nura here, part of the problem is there is no subclass associated with this as of yet. So if we go in here into the details tab, we'll call it monk. That's all fine, but it has nothing for advancement, right? So we can enable, and then we can go through here for the hit points. So that automation will exist now. And then we can go through, grant items. And then from here, for the main class, assuming you're using one of the SRD classes, and most of them are most of the classes are SRD classes. It's the subclasses that are the problem, really. You can go through this and you can kind of get a sense of what you need to do. So we don't really need to worry about level 1 through 6, but just to make the point, you basically come through here and you can just slide all the old stuff into the new stuff, and that's good enough. And then for martial arts die, this gets a little bit more complicated because you can't edit directly in here, so you don't know exactly what it's calling everything. So for that, just drag the monk over to your items tab, then open it up, go back into advancement, and now we can edit this field. And now you basically just duplicate it. So add scaling martial arts die, and we'll just call it die because that's what they call it. Dice, and then you can see D4, D6. Anyway, you get the point. We don't need to build this whole thing out, but you get the point. You can basically not remove anything that you've already done and just go through everything from this point on. I don't think it will be that big of a problem, but if we drop in way of the open hand here, you can see it duplicated wholeness of body, but that's easy enough to delete. And thankfully it's linked into monk. We did this when we went into monk and we added that little thing there. One thing that I'm noticing though is it doesn't have the identifier that this is your original class. And I don't really see a way of adding that after the fact. So that's just something you're going to have to live without. Not that big of a deal. The other thing that you're going to have to live without, unless you're willing to go back through level by level, is it's not going to keep track of your previous levels that you've already done, which makes sense. But, you know, it's just another thing to keep in mind. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is a impossible task or anything, and you can use the newly updated classes to quickly make these updates, so it's certainly not insurmountable or anything. It's just a lot of busy work for characters you've already leveled up, and depending on how far you've strayed from vanilla content, again, this might just be a bigger pain for some people than others. So my opinion is this is a great update, and it lays down a great foundation for even more automation in the future. This will be especially good if Foundry ever makes a deal with Wizards of the Coast and is able to sell D&D content through Foundry, preventing us from having to manually create 95% of the classes in the game ourselves. I think if you're starting up a new campaign, this is a no-brainer. You should absolutely update, and you're gonna love all the automation. But if you're in the middle of a campaign, especially if you've got characters who stray from the SRD content or homebrew at all, or have modified from the vanilla Foundry abilities and whatnot, then I think you should definitely think about whether or not you want to update right now. Personally, I think it's probably more trouble than it's worth, as it will probably take you hours to fix all of your players' characters for them just to gain some automation, which who really cares? Automation is supposed to save you time, but if you have to spend hours to save a few minutes every time your characters level up, which isn't going to be that often anyway for most campaigns, you're unlikely to ever benefit from that. So I would definitely give this a pass for now if you're in that camp, and wait until you start up a new campaign to update, or at least wait for Foundry to add some new features to the D&D rule set that you can't live without. If you want to completely ignore this update, but install it anyway, they do give you an option in configure settings, system settings, disable level up automation. You could click that and then you'll basically be good to go. It won't bother with any of the stuff. Some of the stuff is still going to be broken, I think, just from the update, but it'll at least disable that much of it. I hope this video helped you guys out. I plan to cover a variety of Foundry modules I use in the near future, so if you're interested in that kind of content, drop the video a like and subscribe to see more from me in the future. See you all next time.